My microphone is too loud. Now we fixed it. Welcome to the Wells Report. Good to have you here. Thanks very much for joining us. We are working our way through another day of news, and we are going to bring it to you. All is well, I promise. Let's see here. Let me try one more thing. I'm trying to get something worked on. Trying to get something worked on LinkedIn to try to figure stuff out, and that's not going to work. So LinkedIn is probably not going to work today, but that's one of those things. But welcome to the live stream of the Wells Report. We bring you the news, we bring you analysis, we bring you commentary and debate, and we are glad that you are here. The January 6th committee is continuing their work, whatever that is. It is something that I have looked at with a jaundiced as what I see is a tremendously biased event. It is a continual redress of things that have already happened and already been talked about. Indeed, the President of the United States has already been impeached over some of these things. And it seems to be a continual one-sided regurg of what is going on. Let me bring you up to date as to what's been happening, courtesy of USA Today. The focus is Donald Trump's apparent pressure on Vice President Mike Pence to refuse the Electoral College votes of certain states that former President Trump believed was indeed something that was a problem with election fraud. Let me give you some of the things that we're talking about, or they're talking about today. Mark Short, chief of staff to former President Mike Pence, said Mike Pence told former President Donald Trump many times any plan to have Pence reject electoral votes was illegal. Federal Judge J. Michael Lutig told the January 6th committee that had Pence obeyed orders from Trump on January 6th, jumping to the idea that President Trump had actually given orders to Mike Pence. Once again, that is not what has happened yet, or at least we have not heard about Donald Trump giving orders to his vice president to essentially violate the Constitution and the law. But the judge said that should Michael Pence have obeyed those orders, it would have plunged America in what he says would tantamount to a revolution within a constitutional crisis, which seems to me to be a bit of an overstatement. Greg Jacob, counsel to Pence, said that while the Electoral Count Act includes ambiguous text, common sense and structure would tell you it cannot possibly be that a vice president would have the authority to choose the U.S. president under the Constitution. Completely correct. Fox News' Sean Hannity actually made the committee today. From what the testimony read, Sean Hannity told White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows in text messages of his concerns around the January 6th event. On December 31st, I do not see January 6th happening the way it is being told. He was very worried about the next 48 hours. Representative Pete Aguilar said the January 6th committee found that by January 4th, Trump, quote, had engaged in a, quote, multi-week campaign to pressure Mike Pence to decide the outcome of the election, unquote. It involved private conversations, none of these conversations have actually been testified about. In fact, one of the lawyers that is currently involved in the actual cross-examination or examination of the witnesses, not a congressional member, but a lawyer, talked a little bit about how the private conversations were not open for discussion between the president and the vice president. So all of this is essentially an assumption on the part of the people who are currently testifying and currently being talked about by the January 6th committee. Let's see what else. John Eastman, a White House advisor, acknowledged his proposals would violate provisions of the Electoral Count Act. Pence's former legal counsel, Greg Jacob, said that Eastman thought this was okay because he viewed the act itself as unconstitutional. Well, it isn't unconstitutional. It has not been ruled on as such. I don't know where he would come up with that idea. Jacob, in describing the standoff that could arise under Eastman's plans for rejecting electors. Now, this is USA Today copy. Remember, the electors that were asked to or being talked about were not all the electors. They were electors from certain states that President Trump believed had some miscreancy involved in their elections. Anyway, that was assuming the courts did not get involved, and said that result could have been an unprecedented constitutional jump ball situation, might well then have to be decided in the streets. Again, inflammatory language. So Pence's team has said this. They are shocked and disappointed by the Trump claim that he and the vice president were in agreement. Pence and Trump had a disagreement about Pence's authority to reject election results in a private Oval Office meeting, so says the story. When the New York Times reported on the meeting, Trump's office released a statement denying the article, claiming that he and Pence are in total agreement that the vice president had the power to act. The statement was categorically untrue, said Jacob, as Pence and his office had consistently rejected the idea that he had authority to reject his election results. Jacob said Pence's office had no prior knowledge of the statement and were shocked and disappointed by it. As the rift between Trump and Pence grew due to their disagreements about Pence's ability to overturn the election, Pence's chief of staff, Mark Short, became concerned for Pence's safety. Short was worried enough to consult the Secret Service. The concern was for the vice president's security, so I wanted to make sure the head of the vice president's Secret Service was aware that likely, as these disagreements became more public, the president would lash out in some way. That is just irresponsible drivel. That's absolutely irresponsible drivel. You don't have to worry about the vice president's security. The vice president's security was and is as good as it can possibly be. And once again, the overheated rhetoric about this being settled in the streets, I'll just leave for your own particular interpretation. I will say this. You got to keep something in mind, and I'm sure the committee is aware of this. And what you have to keep in mind is the fact that Mike Pence is very doubtless going to run for president of the United States in 2024. Donald Trump would represent a serious impediment to that effort. And so anything that is essentially being testified to, not by Vice President Pence himself, it's being done through surrogates of Vice President Pence. Remember that this has political overtones that just can't be ignored. It just can't be ignored. And so, once again, what we have here is we have some very carefully crafted, shall we say, testimony, because it's not really testimony. It's essentially a recitation of whatever a one-sided committee can come up with. It's more, like I've said before, it's a propaganda piece. It is essentially an hours-long anti-Trump 2024 election effort. Now, we have seen confusing things coming out of the committee. For example, the chairman, Benny Thompson of Mississippi, says there are not going to be DOJ referrals. Squarely laying that on the DOJ to move forward with that. And if the DOJ does indeed move forward with that, then all it is another monument to the very unfortunate politicization of the Justice Department and indeed federal law enforcement. But then again, ever since James Comey, we've all known that. And so there's some other things. That was from USA Today. I hesitate to do this, but let's go through the updates from CNN. Liz Cheney, vice chair of the House committee investigating the January 6th attack, opened today's hearing by taking direct aim at former President Donald Trump. Today, we're focusing on Donald Trump's relentless efforts to pressure Mike Pence to refuse to count electoral votes on January 6th. Once again, glossing over the fact that these electoral votes they're talking about are on disputed states, not the entire electoral count. But they don't say that. And it's not being reported like that. Today, we're focusing on President Trump's relentless efforts. Again, that's a qualification that is of Liz Cheney's creation. She played a clip of Pence describing what happened in a speech. President Trump said, I had the right to overturn the election. President Trump is wrong. I had no right to overturn the election, which was true. President Trump was told repeatedly that Mike Pence lacked the constitutional authority and legal authority to do what President Trump was demanding he do. Once again, inflammatory language for no real reason aside from the fact that this is a political issue from day one. Greg Jacob, who served as counsel to Mike Pence when he was vice president, had testified, and he played a critical role in countering efforts to persuade former vice president not to certify the electoral results. He was part of vice president's team that pushed back against John Eastman, the conservative lawyer who embraced fringe legal theories about the vice president's ability to overturn the election. Indeed, in the testimony, it came out that not even John Eastman was totally convinced that his rather, shall we say, avant-garde understanding of the Electoral Count Act of 1887 was anywhere close to real. And so that's where they're going now. Once again, I would like to be able to tell you that this was a serious effort, but there is no cross-examination from the opposition. There is no opposition on this committee. The two, quote, Republicans, unquote, are vehemently anti-Trump operatives, and they operate in that form. And so we're not going to be able to see a whole lot of this bringing up new information or anything of the kind. It's essentially an effort to besmirch President Donald Trump in ways that are, shall we say, clearly unfair insofar as they're going to presidential aides and chiefs of staff and so on and so on. Donald Trump has not been the president of the United States for quite some time, but they can't let go. They simply cannot let go because he does represent a serious political threat. Mike Pence is a very, very good politician. He's one of the most professional politicians I've ever seen. And he does indeed know exactly what is at stake here. This is now moving from a situation where we are both trying, at one point the committee is trying to destroy the political prospects of Donald Trump while promoting the political prospects of Mike Pence, which should tell you something about this political process. This political process is one that seeks to harbor advantage, develop advantage, and an attempt by a Democrat-biased committee to perhaps sway the outcome of who is chosen to be the Republican standard bearer for the 2024 election. Keep everything in mind. Keep everything in mind. You are listening to The Wells Report. Thank you for being here. Back with more in just a moment. Let me see if I can get LinkedIn going. Let me see if I can get LinkedIn going. Let's see. I want an event. Yep. Okay, hold on. The Wells Report for June 16th, 2022. Let's see, that's where we want to be. And let's go down here and let's pick this. And let's go to 2:30 p.m. 2:30 p.m., JD. 2:30 p.m., not 10:30 p.m. So this interchange, this interface is kind of strange. All right. It's like, here we go. 2:30 p.m. to 5 p.m. External event link. Bingo. Next. And post it. All righty then. Invite your connections to the event. Let's do that. Okay. What the hell? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder who that could be. Let's keep going. What the hell? We got about a minute here. I'm sorry, I'm working on some other things here. So I will be with you in just a moment. No. Let's see if we can get Helen involved. Mhm. Go ahead. Let's invite those folks and see if they show up. Okay. Let's get back to business. Welcome back to the Wells Report. I am John David Wells. We're giving you the news analysis. We're giving you commentary and debate, and you can call 817 379 2172. That is 817 379 2172. We are waiting for you on that telephone line. It's going to ring right over here. I have fancy equipment. We are going to use it. Absolutely. So once again, we just got finished talking a little bit about what was going on with the January 6th committee. Today, they're focusing on supposed pressure from Donald Trump regarding Mike Pence. Mike Pence is not testifying directly. He's being testified for by his chief of staff and his counsel. Now, that is a politically astute move because, as I said just moments ago, Mike Pence is a brilliant politician. He knows exactly what to do. What he wants to do is he wants to run for president in 2024. And he's got just as much of a chance as anybody else besides Donald Trump. But in this particular case, it's kind of a soft curveball being served up to Michael Pence by the committee. Because at once he has a chance to weaken President Trump. And at the other hand, if he comes out of this committee looking like a very astute politician who made the right moves during the January 6th count of electoral votes, he followed the law, then what he can do in the 2024 election is count on some support by people that otherwise would ignore Donald Trump. So this is a very politically astute move. And it's kind of important that we keep that in mind as you hear all of this back and forth from Donald Trump to Mike Pence and Mike Pence to Donald Trump and so on. All right. It's important to keep that in mind. Is it the only thing? Is it the be all end all? No. It is not. And once again, we report the story. You figure it out. You figure out what it means to you. Moving on to President Biden, his top aides are weighing in on whether he can or should take a series of executive actions to help women in Republican-controlled states obtain abortions if the Supreme Court eliminates a woman's right to end her pregnancy. This, according to senior administration officials. That is patently unconstitutional. There is no way that a president can sit at his desk and make law, no more than the Supreme Court of the United States can sit at their bench and make constitutional rights. And so this is something that I'm very surprised about, that we'd even hear this. Some of the ideas under consideration include declaring a national public health emergency. Does that sound familiar? Since we have broken the seals on government control of healthcare, the government now, the politicians involved in government now believe that they can do that as a political tool at any time. They would ready the Justice Department to fight any attempt by states to criminalize travel for the purpose of obtaining abortion and assert that the Food and Drug Administration regulations granting approval to abortion medications preempt any state bans. I doubt very sincerely that anybody is going to ban any kind of abortion medication. And I doubt very sincerely that if they did, it would stand for more than about, 15 minutes in any court, let alone federal. Once again, this is all essentially a whip-up of hysteria ahead of Roe v. Wade, the Roe v. Wade decision. So now we find ourselves in a position where, again, the media, everybody sort of finding their way to be able to make the decisions that they need to make with regards to how to move political policy forward. The only problem with it is it's certainly not the media's job to move political policy forward. It's the media's job to report the news. And that's what we do here. I know it's possible. I do it every day. Right here between 2 and 5 Central Time on the Wells Report. Our telephone number again, 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. You can text us on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn. Join us on the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. Yeah. And just like that, we are moving. Let's see what else we got going on here. Let's say hello to everyone. Let's say hello, Jessica Hamilton Kennedy. Mike Renwee, how's it going, my friend? Jeff Emerson, they don't want him serving a new term, but mark it when he gets into office again, he will the left will assuredly storm the Capitol. Yeah. Let's see. Jeff says hi. Lois Floyd, hello. Kathleen Branson, what is going on? Pence, really? Yeah, Pence, really. They can't get off their anti-Trump horse already, says Jessica. It's been dead for a while. True. Replying to Jessica Hamilton Kennedy, says Ann Hoy Guzman, they wouldn't have anything to talk about then. That is true. Isaac Tate checks in. How's it going, Isaac? So when they postponed for Bush and Knothead, what was the illegal and unconstitutional? I'm confused by that. Can you clarify that a little bit, Ann? I'm sorry. The sarcasm overwhelmed my understanding of what you were saying. When states certified the votes, it's the end of the process. Well, not exactly. Not exactly. If you watch the hearing, Trump lawyers mentioned Al Gore. If you believe Trump's theory, Gore would have been president. Yeah, there's no way. There's no way this cockamamie idea could possibly ever withstand the light of day. It's absolutely not. Okay, let's see. Replying, the electoral vote was already in. Yeah. JD, what did you think about Trump and Eastman? Knew the vice president didn't have the election authority yet. Trump continued to press Pence and lie about VP powers. Well, all I can tell you is the whole thing was superfluous. It was ridiculous. There was no way that was going to happen in any way, shape, or form. The question is, was that indeed President Trump's intent? And right now, they haven't really drawn that line. What we have, this is another thing. This is one of the problems about grabbing texts and talking about hearsay evidence regarding conversations. They have rules in court for this exact reason, because the objective is fact, but this isn't about fact. This is about politics. That's one of the big problems I have with it. And so all of these little snippets, the committee is hoping that people draw the conclusion that they've already drawn. That President Trump was essentially trying to take over the nation, and that's simply not the case. Let's see, has anybody really investigated the Supreme Court leak? Let me tell you about the Supreme Court leak. I'm pretty sure that what's going to happen with the Supreme Court leak is that that'll probably be settled behind closed doors, and that would be the best thing for it. You probably won't hear about who it was that they fined. You probably won't hear about what the punishment will be. You probably won't hear about any of that, because it's not really productive to do so. This isn't like, it isn't a crime to do what was done. It is a procedural matter in the Supreme Court. So that's how that's working. No electoral votes in Florida were not already in. They were counting the votes and had a disagreement about Chad ballots. Once the South Carolina decision, that was it. No more. Supreme Court decision, that was it. No more challenges. Well, yeah, that was true. But that's a completely different kettle of fish. That's completely different. What kind of EO could he write that would force states to allow abortion? He can't. He can't do anything of the kind. Hi, Eric. How's it going? Good to have you here. Gail Corpier is back. Let's see. Bush Gore was postponed, but the electoral vote was in. Why couldn't Pence legally postpone? Well, because the postponement was from the Supreme Court, as I recall. Let's see. You have been on the air. They just showed statements of Ivanka and Jared. Trump called Pence, demanded Pence reject votes from 5 states. The lawyers and family members just confirmed. Okay, well, I'm doing something else. I'm a little busy. We'll have that for you tomorrow. How about that? Okay. So that's where we stand right now. I'm not going to do a play-by-play on the committee. Once again, it is one-sided. And it is not anything close to fair. And it needs to be. If we're going to do something of this gravity, we have to make sure that we do it right. That's what I think. And this is not being. I will. You are listening to the Wells Report. I am John David Wells. Our telephone number again is 817-379-2172. That's our telephone number. Give us a buzz. We are taking a look at elections around the country. And there have been some interesting things happening right here in Texas. And I'm fascinated by the way they're doing this. Latino Democrats in the House of Representatives are taking strong issue with the National Democrat Party. And the reason they're doing so is because Republican Mayra Flores won a South Texas congressional seat in a special election. That particular seat had been held exclusively by Democrats for more than a century. Flores decisively defeated Democrat Dan Sanchez in a Tuesday runoff election that Republicans say is indicative of a new trend for Latino voters. Democrats argue the election was just a fluke. Nevertheless, many Latino Democrats say their party has taken their voters for granted for too long, which is part and parcel of Democrat politics. It's true. They take their voters for granted. Indeed, they take the American people for granted. And they take a lot of things for granted. That's the things that the Democrat Party has to work on. It comes from hubris. It comes from arrogance. They just believe that they are so right and they are so committed to, they are absolutely correct in all things, that there really isn't any room for discussion. And that's why when you get into some sort of a discussion about some kind of a political issue involving virtually any Democrat for any reason, you are either put down as being mentally defective or you are put down as a conspiracy theorist, or you are put down as a racist or a white supremacist or any number of other things. They are so sure that they are correct, they cannot brook argument. And this is something that they can't argue against. The argument that, say, for example, that Hispanics are not being taken for granted, it's obvious. America's black population been taken for granted by the Democrat Party for at least a century. The famous quote, of course, President Biden saying, "If you don't vote for me, you ain't black." Oh, okay. Whatever you say, Mr. President. But that was, can you imagine? Can you imagine any Republican saying that? Can you imagine any Republican saying that and what the hue and cry would have been had they done so? But once again, we've got such biased news coverage. It's one of the reasons why you're here. So Democrat Dan Sanchez put aside by Mayra Flores, and Mayra Flores will be seated in the House of Representatives from a district that has been lorded over by a Democrat for over a century. A lot of the Democrats that are very, very big in Washington, D.C., one of them, Representative Henry Cuellar, a Democrat from Texas, says the DCCC needs to sit down and look at South Texas seriously. I don't think it's a political realignment, but this should send a message to the DCCC. You can't take Hispanics for granted, which they always do. People have been saying that Hispanics are at odds with Democrat Party policy. By the way, the DCCC, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, Vicente Gonzalez, also from Texas, a Democrat. I hope the DCCC learns their lesson with this before it happens across the country. I think that cat's out of the bag. They've just forgotten about brown people on the border. That's basically what it is. I'm not going to try to sugarcoat it anymore. They are taking Latinos in South Texas for granted. Republicans capitalizing on the Flores win, arguing it was just further evidence the party is making headway into the Latino community. This after former President Donald Trump received historic support from the demographic. That's demo is industry jargon. President Donald Trump received historic support from the demographic in 2020. Precursor of things we think are to come in the Hispanic communities across the country, said Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel. Democrats should be very, very worried about what we're seeing with Hispanic voters. Well, certainly. That is something that they should be very careful of and very, very wary of. There are other problems when it comes to Democrat election results and what is happening after those elections. This again was something that a lot of people complained about, but nobody actually saw a remedy for, and that was George Soros pushed and financed progressive district attorneys from around the country. The blowback is all but immediate. They've already turned one out of office in San Francisco, and now in Los Angeles, George Gascon, who is the district attorney there, they are in a position of recalling him. As a matter of fact, the petitions that were necessary to be able to put this particular question, the recall of LA District Attorney George Gascon, they finally got enough signatures. The campaign told the Fox News that it received over 30,000 petitions in the past few days in an effort to gather the 567,857 needed by July 6th. The group said it hit the target Wednesday, but is working toward collecting 650,000 signatures. Some will be deemed invalid by Los Angeles County officials. This is only going to happen if people remain focused and we don't get complacent. That's according to Recall Gascon campaign co-chair Kathy Cady. We've already gathered 566,000 signatures, which is the most that have ever been gathered in Los Angeles County. But as you know, when we turn those in, some will be invalidated. So we need to make sure we have a cushion. And our current goal is to collect those signatures. The recall is the second attempt by supporters to oust Gascon, who came into office in December 2020 on a criminal justice reform platform. Well, he's reforming himself right out of office. And there are others. The Philadelphia DA is in trouble. And all of these guys have followed progressive these progressive criminal justice moves that seem to value the needs of the criminal over the needs of the victims. And that's where that goes. Some other things that have been happening, a little bit of news from the past. Sarah Palin is working her way back into Washington politics from Alaska. She's been working on a campaign to return or at least show up at the House of Representatives for the first time. Representative Don Young of Alaska died. That left a U.S. House seat open. And Sarah Palin is among three candidates who are advancing to Alaska's special election in August. Young held the seat for 49 years before dying in March at age 88. Alaska's novel, mainly vote by mail election system was held Saturday, included candidates of all parties for the state's only open house seat. Palin was one of nearly 50 candidates and enjoyed huge name recognition over many of the others. With 132,732 votes counted, Palin had a 28.3% lead, followed by Republican Nick Begich with 19.3% and independent Al Gross with 12.8%. Democrat Mary Peltola had 8.7%, Republican Tara Sweeney 5.5%. The top four advanced to the special election, which will include a ranked choice system approved by the voters in 2020. The fourth candidate has yet to be decided. The winner will serve until January, the end of Young's term. Certification of the Saturday results had been in doubt last weekend over a legal challenge that claimed mail ballots discriminated against visually impaired voters. The state's high court ruled the certification could go ahead. And so Sarah Palin looks like she is moving her way back into some form of power in Washington, D.C. in this special election. Now, where does this leave us for the 2022 election? Well, there are a lot of things in play. And what's fascinating about it is when you start getting back to the South Texas Democrats being upset with the national party, you can see that there's big trouble in the Democrat Party. This is something that they have been working on for, I don't know, a couple of decades at this point. The Democrat Party seems to be willing to take America where people don't want it to go, inflicting policies on Americans that they don't want, taking their voting blocks for granted and just saying, well, we'll have this support. Well, sooner or later, accountability comes calling. Sooner or later, you have to have something more than just words and, say, for example, charismatic candidates. You have to have something going to actually move the needle toward getting votes. And I've been talking about this for a long, long time. The Democrat Party has assuredly lost its way. And you could tell. The way that has been lost is that progressive candidates in the Democrat Party are doing ridiculous things that badly damage their own brand. The Supreme Court Family Protection Bill that languished in the House of Representatives. They are willing to go ahead and take that political damage. And I assure you there are political damage. 27 House Democrats voted against that bill. Only Democrats. Nobody in the United States wants Supreme Court justices or any federal judge intimidated at their own house. I mean, are there laws missing? Certainly. Whatever laws that are missing that keep people from trying to intimidate a judge, and they're on the books. It's not necessarily the law that's missing. What's missing is the law enforcement. That is a problem. And there were at least 27 House members that believed that the protection of those families, the protection of those justices was not something they wanted to take part in. You would think that that would have drastic political ramifications. But for whatever reason, these people believe that they are completely impervious to accountability. And that's why they're moving the way they move. I just don't see how this forwards the Democrat brand. You know, a lot of people, when I start talking about the Democrat Party, they say, John David, why are you telling them how to solve their problems? Because we have another political problem in the United States, and that's the Republican Party. The Republican Party talks in grave terms about the problems of the nation. We've got to do something about Obamacare. We've got to turn that over. And when it came right down to doing it, what was their plan? Nothing. So all it was political posturing. And they got hammered for it. And they should have gotten hammered for it. What's being forgotten in all of this, and this ties to everything we're talking about so far in this hour of the Wells Report, from the January 6th committee that does not include the opposition side or any kind of adversarial testimony, to all of these elections that are already done, some going badly awry, like the LA District Attorney's Office. That guy's going to be recalled at some point. Now we find ourselves with people changing their ideas regarding who they should vote into office, specifically the Hispanic vote in South Texas. All of these things come together in a process that really shuts out the people of the United States. Like I refer to on a regular basis, government of the government, for the government, by the government. It's a bad idea, and it's not long-term successful. It will not be. At some point, we, the people of the United States, had better explain in very clear terms that the days of the political machine are over. The only reason political machines work is because there is inadequate communication between the voters. Those days are gone. Those days are gone. Anybody in the entire world can tune in to the Wells Report right now on the internet and see me talking about any number of things having to do with politics in the United States and what's going badly awry with those. Well, that's just part of the conversation. This would have never happened, at least on a credible way, even 10 years ago, but certainly 20 years ago. It's like the political process hasn't awakened to the fact that people talk amongst themselves and can do so. All you got to do is get to a computer. You can introduce yourself to people all around the country that you've never met and very likely never will. It is horrendous that they're missing the boat. Now, when the boat sails after the 2022 election, how many Democrats will be on it? This is going to sound partisan, but it isn't. I hope very few. Because the Democrat Party has to refine its way. It is an American political party, not a progressive one, not a Democrat one, not a socialist one. It is an American political party. They serve Americans. And when they deride America first, what are they actually deriding? They're deriding the country they hope to lead. To what end? To destroy it? This is the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. Okay, let's see here. Well, the objective on all this, Isaac, is to have a political process that serves the public instead of itself. The political process has to serve the people of the United States as opposed to themselves. And that they don't is wildly destructive, not just to their own endeavors, but to the endeavors of the United States. We can't do this. We can't allow this. And this gets back to what else I talk about. That gets back to the mainstream media that basically hands passes to America's left and will exploit and leverage every possible opportunity to damage the right. And what gets farther and farther and farther away and farther over the horizon is the people of the United States being able to actually hold government accountable, especially when the mainstream media will not hold half of the government accountable. They just won't. Okay. Well, how does that serve anybody? It doesn't serve anybody. You know, here we are, another made-for-television extravaganza about Donald Trump. He's been out of office for 2 years. I mean, there are all kinds of ways that you can look at this. My favorite happens to be that they're trying to damage Donald Trump to the point where he will have difficulty mounting a credible challenge for the 2024 presidential nomination. But the thing about that is that they really don't have to do that. You know, the only reason the Republicans haven't come out as anti-Trump is because they realize it'll cost them 74 million voters. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. I've been in Texas since 2006. That is a long time. And I have been watching and listening and taking part in talk radio around here for a very long time, too. Many of my colleagues talk about the southern border between Texas and Mexico and talk about how it's an invasion with all kinds of florid, hyperbolic, inaccurate statements about what's happening. Is it an onslaught? Yeah. Yeah, it's an onslaught. The number of people trying to move to the United States of America illegally is an onslaught. It is. Is it an invasion? No. It's an onslaught. Is the border being overrun? Yes, it is. Yes, it's being overrun. Remember, any amount of time that we spend working on trying to relocate illegal immigrants, many of them children, any amount of time that we spend relocating those people into places where they either go back to their home countries or wherever the Biden administration chooses to send them, or in the case of Texas, 76 buses unloaded illegal Hispanic immigrants in Washington, D.C. And there are more planned. When you are discussing all of this, you know, what you're doing when you take away resources that normally would be involved in security for the border, the people that profit from insecurity at the border flourish. So all of this is basically a giant misdirection campaign. And when I say a giant misdirection campaign, let me tell you just how giant. Reported by Fox News today, the number of migrant encounters at the southern border hit a new record in May. 239,416 encounters in 1 month. Customs and Border Protection announced late yesterday officials fear that the already unprecedented numbers will keep rising through the summer. The 239,416 migrant encounters eclipses 180,597 encountered in May of 2021 and the 23,237 encountered in May of 2020. I mean, think of those numbers. It's less than 10%. I mean, the main numbers in 2020 in President Trump's last year in office, 23,237 encountered in May. as opposed to May of this year, 239,416. The massive numbers came during a month in which the Biden administration sought to end expulsions under Title 42, which was implemented during the Trump administration due to COVID-19 and have been used to expel a majority of migrants at the border. The Biden administration was ultimately blocked by a federal judge from ending the order. Expulsions continued through May, although the percentage of those dipped, with just 42% of those encountered expelled at the border. Of the migrants encountered, 55% of all single adults were expelled, and 17% of migrant families were expelled. Fox goes on to report that despite the fraction of the number of family units expelled, CBP Commissioner Chris Magnus said in a statement, current restrictions at the U.S. border have not changed. Single adults and families encountered at the southwest border will continue to be expelled where appropriate under Title 42. He went on to say, as temperatures start to rise in the summer, and man, it's hot down there. I mean, it is so hot. It's hot and humid. I've lived in some of the most hot and most humid places in the world, New Orleans leading the list until the time I spent at Zapata and Laredo and Del Rio in South Texas. Oh my. As the temperatures start to rise, human smugglers will continue to exploit vulnerable populations, recklessly endanger the lives of migrants for financial gain and other gain. The terrain along the southwest border is extreme. The summer heat is severe. The miles of desert migrants must hike after crossing the border are unforgiving. Messages for those who would try to gain illegal entry into the United States remains the same. Don't make the dangerous journey, only to be sent back. And so, what are we seeing? We are seeing accountability coming to call at long last. And that should be in the form of the 2020 election. But this is unsustainable. And this is a Washington policy move. And who makes Washington policy moves? The Biden administration. President Biden is someone who is going to take responsibility and accountability for what has been going on the southern border. The Democrats will also find accountability coming to call. You simply cannot open the border to all kinds of human trafficking and human smuggling without it having some kind of frank and even dangerous effect. And people are noticing. It's one of the great things about information, which leads us back to, okay, what does big tech do with information that they don't like politically? Well, they disappear it. And what do we do if we have too many votes for one candidate? Well, maybe what we do is we look at playing around with the votes. I mean, Dominion voting machines, and we don't get to know how they work because it's a trade secret? You must be joking. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. This is the first hour. We've got another one coming up next and a third after that. This is the Wells Report. Back in just a moment. Hey, Isaac, you're spending an awful lot of time arguing with everything. Just want to point that out. But first, blind loyalty to Trump. It's not blind loyalty to Trump. As opposed to your blind loyalty to Biden. I mean, come on, man. It wasn't an attempted coup. It was not an attempted coup in any way, shape, or form. And are you actually saying that what we need to do is we need to prosecute people for what they attempt to do or what they actually do? Okay? Just saying. Let me run. I'll be right back. Hi, welcome to the Wells Report. For those people that have been sitting here looking at an empty studio, I just I just realized that because of a dramatic upgrade to our technical facilities, I can put something there that you can watch. It's not very exciting, but we can do it anyway, so I will. About 10 seconds.
It's 15 hours.
North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. We give you news. We give you analysis. Not analysis as to what the news means. There are too many people doing that. We analyze news for fact. We report the fact. And yes, we draw not conclusions, but contrast between the news and the fact. Oftentimes, two completely disparate concepts. We then make commentary, and yeah, that's my opinion, but my opinion is my opinion. What is yours? Well, I hope to hear them. And that's why we have this telephone number. It is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. That's 817-379-2172. Call us. I'll put you right on the air. And we'll have our conversations. There is a chat room. It's rocking. And we are rolling through the news of the day. I've often said that racism is a crime against humanity. And it is. What I will also tell you is the exploitation of racism is a crime against humanity from a political standpoint. What it does is it essentially is used as a lever to cancel people, to run them out of the First Amendment, an amendment at least as under attack as the Second, the Fourth, the Fifth, the Sixth, on and on and on. This onslaught against the Constitution of the United States should stop, but it's not going to be stopped by the political process. It's only going to be stopped by we, the people of the United States, deciding again that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that this nation is good, not bad, that this nation is the greatest in the world and is not in need of change. Now, I will put forth and have several times, as we started this by saying that racism was a crime against humanity, I will tell you the exploitation of crime against humanity, the exploitation of racism, is a crime against the United States. It is damaging this nation. It is unnecessary. It is something that must be set aside. Conversations like this hopefully will lead the way in something to be done about the exploitation of a gaping national wound. It's time to stop. Time to stop picking at it. Time to start moving away from it, as we have done in the past. There was a guy, a self-described leftist, progressive, crazy man, who killed 10 black people in Buffalo. It was indeed a calculated act. It was calculated on so many different fronts. The weapons he chose, the people that he targeted. And the more we find out about this person, Peyton S. Gendron, the more we have to kind of recoil in horror. He's 18 years old. He killed 10 black people, or accused of it. He hasn't been convicted of it. Therefore, he is still innocent. But he's been accused of killing 10 black people at a Buffalo, New York supermarket. He wrote a letter to his family. He left it behind in his bedroom. Handwritten, was found by the FBI. He wrote in that note that he had to commit this attack because he cared for the future of the white race. Details were revealed in a criminal complaint filed yesterday by prosecutors at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of New York. The U.S. Justice Department announced multiple federal hate crime charges against the suspect. Some charges carry the potential for the death penalty. More about that coming up in just a moment. I guess it's Gendron or Gendron. His motive for the mass shooting was to prevent black people from replacing white people and eliminating the white race, and to inspire others to commit similar attacks. Now, keep in mind, this is CNN. This is CNN news that I'm reading from, and therefore, the idea and the knowledge that this guy was a confirmed leftist is left out of this particular copy. That's one of the factual things that we analyze out of the news. And what we do is remind you of that, not necessarily to make a point, but just to keep you informed. The quote comes from the complaint. It is as follows. Gendron's motive for the mass shooting was to prevent black people from replacing white people and eliminating the white race, and to inspire others to commit similar attacks. He was shackled, wearing the orange jumpsuit so common in circumstances like this. He had a black face covering when he made his first appearance in federal court before U.S. Magistrate Judge Kenneth Schrader. Gendron looked down at the charges, looked down as the charges were read. Two U.S. marshals monitoring him. He did not enter a plea. The section of the court saved for the family of the shooting victims was full, around 20 people, all of them black. Most family members looked straight at Gendron when he came in and throughout the proceeding. There were audible sniffles. Some wiped away tears, as you might expect. Raymond and Garnell Whitfield, sons of 86-year-old shooting victim Ruth Whitfield, said their mom went to every event throughout their lives, so they needed to be there for her in this court proceeding. Raymond Whitfield told CNN before the hearing, quote, "This is very difficult, laying eyes on the person who shot your mother down in a grocery store." The judge assigned a federal public defender after questioning Gendron about his financial situation and reviewing a financial affidavit. The defendant acknowledged having 2 shares of Disney stock and a checking and savings account. When the judge asked how much money he had in each account, Gendron replied $16. Schrader noted that he was advised that the attorneys appointed to Gendron be learned counsel, meaning they would be familiar with death penalty cases, should the Justice Department seek that penalty. This guy is, according to the allegations, as awful as it could possibly be. He also represents a very convenient symbol in the reaffirmation of the idea that all white people are racist in this nation, and that the problem with the United States is white people. That is awful. That's just as racist as anything else. The exploitation of this for political effect is plain. And sadly, until we, the people of the United States, are able to somehow transmit that we are not the people that we are continually being accused of being, until we make that stick, until we make sure that people understand that without cause, without proof, without any kind of reasoned thought process behind it, that just because somebody disagrees with you politically does not mean that they have a character flaw equal to a crime against humanity. It's infuriating. I mean, I voted for President Donald Trump. Therefore, I am a racist, I'm a white supremacist, I'm all of these things, and it infuriates me. It infuriates most of the people whose labels are currently being stuck to them by this leftist idea that somehow we need to exploit racism as the political tool of the moment. It's infuriating. What it does is it also divides the country further, adding grist to the mill. We, the people of the United States, must progress beyond that stain. All of us, together. And people like this Gendron person who's been accused of killing 6 black people because they were black people, using a weapon because he was sure it would inflame the left to gun control legislation, which would make things far worse, not better. That to do all of this is plain. The idea that this can be done is something that we, the vast majority of Americans, have to revile at our earliest possible opportunity. What is the best communication on these things? The ballot box. The other communication is to, as soon as you see some form of news coverage that without facts and proof deride any population of the United States, regardless of their skin color, of being racist, you've got to turn the channel immediately. We are blessed in this nation of having several different news outlets. Some of them are very, very small, including the Wells Report, which, by the way, must be described as minuscule in the vast scheme of things. But what we need to do is we need to move away from irrational inability to stop using a degenerate political tool, that is the exploitation of racism, and to turn away from racism at every possible opportunity. We must do these things as quickly as we can, because our nation is being tortured over it. Our nation is being tortured over it. The hypocrisy I've discussed many, many times. You know, it's plain and very, very simple to see that there have been things, specifically in the summer of 2020, that were all race-based. It was called social justice, but it was simple racist attack against society and just about anybody who disagreed with the idea that this is a horrifyingly terrible racist country. We'd better stop it. We have to stop it. Now, the natural way of things is, well, this stuff burns itself out. We are going to probably see one of the remedies for this in the 2020 election. There's a political party whose stock in trade is to deride the other half of the country in unsparing and vicious ways. Well, those people are going to vote. And what will hopefully happen is that we will have a wholesale change of the political operatives in the nation who see fit to turn away from the Constitution and all of its protections for the sake of their politics. We need to change. We need to literally clean house. House of Representatives. We need to clean Senate. We need to clean out those people. And in favor of those people should be our neighbors, people that we know, as opposed to people that we only know through a biased media and through what can only be described as the fascist use of racism as a political tool. This one guy, who is a perfect example of everything the left says about not just himself, but the United States of America, finds himself in a position where it may cost him his life. As a matter of fact, there is now a move to expedite that process. We'll discuss that coming up in just a couple of moments. You are listening to the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. Thanks for joining us. What do you think? Terrible? I just realized those things would work. Yeah, what do you think? Yeah, it's a countdown. We've got about 30 seconds. Ten. You are listening to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. The Buffalo gunman faces the death penalty. And they may be very serious about it this time around. A federal judge urged Justice Department lawyers to expedite a decision on whether they will seek the death penalty against the gunman in the Buffalo supermarket massacre. In his first court appearance since being charged with federal hate crimes in the May 14th attack that left 10 dead, Peyton Gendron was put on notice he faced the prospect of death in a case where he's accused of specifically targeting black victims at the Tops Friendly Market. U.S. Magistrate Kenneth Schrader said quick action was necessary so the defense could be afforded access to expert witnesses and other resources needed in capital cases. Assistant U.S. Attorney Joseph Trippi said a determination on whether to seek the maximum penalty was the sole decision of Attorney General Merrick Garland, adding the deliberation would be serious, thorough, and as expedited as possible. I have staked out an opinion regarding the death penalty, and I think it should be there. I think it should be available. I think it should be only available in cases where there is no ambiguity. Where there is any ambiguity, there should be life without parole. In this particular case, should this alleged shooter, should he be found guilty, he should have an appeal on procedural grounds. And should that fail, then someone needs to decide to write a death warrant. I would say about 60 days ought to do it. And what will end up after that would be the end of a life in punishment for his ending of other lives. That, I believe, is the right thing to do. But that's not what's going to happen. We are not sure that Merrick Garland isn't going to be one of those people that believe that indeed the problem with criminal activity is not because we have evil people that want to break the law. The problem is society forces them to be evil people. I believe swift punishment is required under these circumstances. It shouldn't take decades to be able to execute one of these people when it is widely known, proven beyond a reasonable doubt, that they are indeed the perpetrators of heinous crime. They should pay their debt to society immediately, following what would be a reasonable court proceeding to make sure that the trial was reasonably handled. This serves society. It serves on a lot of different ways. You know, we don't have a death penalty as vengeance. We don't have a death penalty as vengeance. The death penalty is to remove someone from society in a way that they cannot ever be a threat to that society again. That's why we try to make it as painless as possible. And we try to make it an assured outcome. There is some solace in the closure that someone who took someone's loved one is equally as absent from society as his victim. There is an understanding in society that if indeed you commit a heinous crime, you will pay for it with your life. Word gets around. It is a deterrence. It deters others from following in those footsteps, as opposed to this particular shooter apparently hoping to inspire others to follow in those footsteps. Those footsteps covered in the blood of innocents. Will Merrick Garland act? I don't know. But I sure hope so. You are listening to the Wells Report. Thanks very much for doing so. Watching it too on a live stream near you. Tell your friends about us. Back with more in just a moment. Okay. Yeah. So I've got to figure out why it is that that one. Let me see if I can. Let me see what I've got here from a standpoint of those videos. I have one that is 3 minutes long. That's for the last stop set. I've got one that's 4 minutes long, and I have one that's 5 minutes long. So what I might do is I might use those. Here, I'll use the 3-minute one. Okay. The only problem with it is the graphics are in the way. Graphics in the way. Let's go ahead and use this one and see how it works. I will be here, and I will be watching the chat. Back with about 15 seconds left before we go back to what we're up to. You are listening to the Wells Report. John David Wells at your service. Telephone number is 379. That's area code 817 379 2172. Call us at any time you'd like, and we'll put you right on the air, I promise. We've just been discussing the alleged shooter in Buffalo who took the lives of 10 people. The magistrate in the case is asking for an expedited decision regarding whether or not the prosecution is going to ask for the death penalty. That decision lies with Merrick Garland. Will he indeed go that route? Will he indeed request the prosecutors pursue the death penalty? Don't know. He may be one of those Soros-like progressives who believe that the criminal only exists because of the society in which he has been badly treated. There's very little debate as to whether or not this was a hate crime. He made it abundantly plain in his testimony and his written word that that is exactly what he was doing. But what I'm trying to figure out is those hate crimes, they don't seem to be applied, shall we say, evenly. The equal protection under the law circumstance, not necessarily something that you see a lot of. Or if you do, it seems hard to prove that there is indeed equal protection under the law. I'll give you another example. A pro-abortion radical group named Jane's Revenge. They are responsible, so they say, for arson attacks and vandalism at pro-life offices and services that provide pro-life pregnancy crisis center counseling. What they have done is they have drafted, there is a leak of one of their draft opinions that would there is a letter it's an open letter to everyone. It's a new letter declaring an open season on pro-life pregnancy crisis centers. The letter speaks of a supposed 30-day deadline for all pro-life groups to cease operations and condemn those who, quote, impersonate healthcare providers in order to harm the vulnerable, unquote. This can tell you that this kind of points at a dramatic lack of logical understanding or the willingness to even consider what that statement means on the part of the people who wrote it. Quote, we were unsurprised to see 30 days come and 30 days pass with no sign of consilience or even bare minimum of self-reflection from you. History may not repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. And we've already seen such stanzas where medical autonomy is stripped away, humanity is increasingly criminalized, and merely surviving becomes largely untenable. We offered an honorable way out. You could have walked away. Now the leash is off, and we will make it as hard as possible for your campaign of oppression to continue. The letter described how easy and fun it is to attack and vowed to take increasingly drastic measures against oppressive infrastructures following the expiration of the supposed deadline, saying this time, quote, those measures may not come in the form of something so easily cleaned up as fire and graffiti. From here forward, any anti-choice group who closes their doors, stops operating, will no longer be a target. But until you do, it's open season, and we know where your operations are. The letter, disseminated in to email subscribers, and in the form of an abolition media blog post, reads, from here forward, any choice group who closes their doors will stop being a target. The group appeals to anyone with the urge to paint, to burn, to cut, to jam, to commit violence. The infrastructure of the enslavers will not survive. We will never stop, back down, slow down, or retreat. We did not want this, but it is upon us. So we must deal with it proportionally. We exist in confluence and solidarity with others in the struggle for complete liberation. Our recourse now is to defend ourselves and build robust, caring communities of mutual aid, so that we may heal ourselves without the need of the medical industry or any other intermediary. Through attacking, we find joy, courage, and strip the veneer of impenetrability held by these violent institutions. According to the letter, Jane's Revenge is not one group but many, and has disseminated communiques from the various cells in locations mainly based in the Pacific Northwest. The letter claimed responsibility for various attacks already seen in cities of Portland, Eugene, and Gresham, Oregon, as well as Olympia, Linwood, and Vancouver in Washington State. Also in Maryland, the group claims to have carried out actions in Reisterstown and Frederick. Other locations named are Madison, Wisconsin, Fort Collins, Colorado, Des Moines, Iowa, Asheville, North Carolina, Buffalo, New York, Hollywood, Florida, Denton, Texas, and Washington, D.C. They will likely find serious difficulty in Denton, Texas. It's very dangerous to do things like this in Texas. We, the people of Texas, keep it that way. The Washington Examiner has documented dozens or incidents of arson and vandalism, or both, targeting at least 13 anti-abortion centers across the country since the leak of a draft opinion in the case of Dobbs versus Jackson. In several of the attacks, mostly lodged at Christian faith-based pregnancy crisis centers, the buildings are tagged with renditions of messages Jane's Revenge, or if abortions aren't safe, neither are you. The Des Moines Register reported that vandals are accused of breaking windows at the Christian Agape Pregnancy Center in Des Moines, Iowa, tagging the message God loves abortions, and after a message online read Jane's Revenge, claimed responsibility and encouraged attacks on churches. In a letter sent June 7th, Senator Jerry Moran of Kansas, supported by 15 other GOP senators, appealed to U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland for information about how the Department of Justice is addressing these disturbing trends of harassment, intimidation, and violence against religious and other pro-life organizations and individuals in the aftermath of this opinion. We are dismayed at the open and public urgency at which the Department of Justice undertook efforts in the name of public safety last year that is not being replicated to currently protect religious and other pro-life organizations and individuals. The letter from GOP political operatives claims the DOJ wasted no time in public response to threats of violence against educators, school administrators, related to COVID-19 back-to-school policies. In its most recent terrorism bulletin, also issued June 7th, Department of Homeland Security warned of a heightened threat environment in the coming months, noting individuals who advocate both for and against abortion have, on public forums, encouraged violence, including against government, religious, and reproductive health care personnel and facilities, as well as those with opposing ideologies. I'm trying to figure out why a pro-life group would attack any of these organizations under the guise of this possible overturning of Roe v. Wade. Last week, a California man was arrested after showing up outside the home of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh with gun, ammunition, tactical knife, zip ties, various burglary tools. The affidavit said the suspect dialed 911, admitted to everything, trying to give his life purpose. And we've already talked about the Buffalo shooter. So what I'm asking in this is I'm asking you whether or not what we see here is essentially a statement that renders Jane's Revenge and those people who follow their precepts as possible committers of hate crimes. Think about where this comes from. At once, Merrick Garland is being asked to take someone who is apparently guilty of a heinous hate crime, expedite the death penalty decision in his trial, and whether he will do so or not do so is anyone's guess. But so far, a letter signed by radical abortion group Jane's Revenge, we haven't heard anything about that except from Fox News. We haven't seen any public statements by Merrick Garland. We've not seen any warning or any kind of condemnation for this kind of activity. In fact, we've seen just the opposite. What we end up seeing is actual members of the House of Representatives, all Democrats, trying to expose people who are enemies of the left, very much like these pro-pregnancy, pro-life pregnancy crisis centers. We don't see anything in response to that. Why? Because federal law enforcement, the idea that we have that we have this equal protection under the law has been set aside. We now have equal protection provided you have the right politics. Should any of these people be caught and attached to Jane's revenge, seems to me that they would, depending on the severity of the crime, face a very severe punishment. Where death is involved, a death penalty case seems to be extremely appropriate to me. Will we see that? Look into your memories. Will we see this? Can you think of a case where, say, for example, an obvious hate crime perpetrated against, say, for example, white people has actually been prosecuted? Or has it been talked about, bandied about, and then has it disappeared in a plea bargain? That's something I'm going to be watching. That's something that many of us do watch anyway. Not because we have any real concern about whether or not someone's going to be punished, regardless of who they attack and regardless of what color skin they happen to have. That's not the point. The point is a nation of laws whose symbol of the judicial process is equality with a blindfolded statue holding scales, the scales of justice. And they are balanced. They should be. But are they? The answer most assuredly is no. And because of this, we find ourselves once again being divided for what can only be political effect. It cannot stand, it should not stand. But how do we do it? Well, we the people must act. This power structure in Washington, D.C. has been carefully cultivated over decades. We need to change it. We need to change it while we still can, if we still can. The federal government is empowered far beyond the Constitution and far beyond anything close to good sense. You know, you keep watching the media trying to apologize at once and explain on the other hand, you know, just exactly why all of these pernicious political policies against the majority of Americans are somehow easily stood and countenanced. You know, I mean, the only reason that there isn't bigger trouble is because most people don't think it's a good idea to run in the streets and burn things down. But we constantly get hammered by this stuff. We constantly get hammered by it. And it's unfair and it's unjust. And since we're talking about justice, I think it's extremely important that we discuss it. We have to change the power structure. You do that at the ballot box. You make concerted decisions to stop electing politicians who exploit issues in the nation and start sending people to Washington, D.C. who will actually provide solutions to those issues. Clearly, we do not have that in Washington, D.C. now. And the abuse of the Justice Department, the abuse of law enforcement, we're not going to, we've got prosecutorial discretion. We're not going to pursue this case. Excuse me? What do you mean you're not going to pursue that case? What are you talking about? The answer is we're talking about an abuse of governmental power. The people of the United States need to send a clear message to those people who abuse that power that that's a mistake. How do you do that? Remove one piece of the puzzle, a very big one. the current power structure in Washington, D.C., and do so peacefully, and do so with votes, and do so immediately. We must. I wonder if Jane's revenge will ever actually see the accountability for that letter. This is the Wells Report. Well, in point of fact, Mike Renwee, regarding Parker's look, Parker, helped me put this all together. This is something that he uses. I think it works. I think it's good. Denton is a pretty dang liberal town, college town. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure that the Texans will show up as soon as the gunfire starts. Now, who's conducting domestic terrorism? Exactly. Is it on my end? JD keeps dropping out for a moment. He's stuttering again, or is this Frontier? Probably Frontier. Let's see. Jessica Denton is apparently filled with retired teachers. Not so much UNT. It's the TWU crowd, Texas Women's University, that is radical left. Give the people of January 6th are still in jail waiting for their political court hearing date. Correct. Ugly and terrible in every possible respect. Ugly and terrible in every possible respect. "30 seconds. You are listening to the Wells Report and watching it too. Thanks very much for watching this stream and this podcast, and I sincerely appreciate the fact that you are doing so. We've been talking about the warpage of American law and the enforcement thereof. We've been talking about how a particular individual can face hate crimes and even the death penalty. And on the other hand, people who are of a different societal caste, shall we say, don't face such draconian events. That seems to be the case. What it is a leftist idea that somehow the downtrodden have carte blanche to violate the law as they see fit in any way they see fit. And they are ably assisted by a bunch of people who really shouldn't be assisting their efforts, specifically DAs, mayors, and so on. There was a headline on Fox News today that was sad. Oregon's drug decriminalization effort is a tragedy. The Fox News prose starts like this. The streets of downtown Portland, Oregon resemble an open-air drug market. Heroin, meth, fentanyl is in rampant use, often visible on city streets. Portland police officers drive by homeless, buying and using. The signs of drug addiction are actually increasing throughout the state, according to law enforcement sources. Oregon ranks second highest among U.S. states for substance abuse, with nearly 1 in 5 adults, 20% of the population, addicted. In November of 2020, voters overwhelmingly passed Measure 110, the Drug Addiction Treatment and Recovery Act. It secured 58% of the vote, decriminalized possessions of small amounts of hard drugs like heroin, meth, cocaine, and fentanyl. The new law made possession of those substances no more than a Class E violation, the equivalent of a traffic ticket, punishable by a maximum $100 fine. The fine is dismissed when someone who is fined calls a help hotline. Lines for Life completes a health assessment. The idea is to connect drug abusers with services and treatment instead of putting them behind bars. 16 months into this first in the nation experiment paint a bleak picture. Drug overdose deaths at an all-time high, with over 1,000, a 41% increase from the year before. Very few people are getting into treatment. According to the Lund report, after 1 year, 136 people entered treatment. Less than 1% of those helped by Measure 110. David Murray, a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, who advised drug czars in 2 different presidential administrations. It's predictable. It was predictable then and now. Unfortunately, it's coming to pass right in front of our eyes. It's a tragedy and a self-inflicted wound. The Oregon Judicial Department reports that through the end of May, police throughout the state had written 2,576 tickets for drug possession since Measure 110 was enacted. 75% of the tickets resulted in convictions, the vast majority because the offender never showed up in court. Dwight Holden, CEO of Lines for Life, tells Fox News only 116 people have called the help hotline. 66 of those callers just wanted verification of the assessment so they could void the ticket. 26, he says, were already in services of some kind and did not want any more. 20% were not previously involved in addiction services and wanted resources, so we connected them with relevant resources. That's the Fox News version of the story. The London Daily Mail looks at it this way. Portland resembles an open-air drug market after legalizing hard drugs. Overdose deaths have skyrocketed by 41%. Is this good? Is this what we need to do? Is this where we're going? And speaking of progressive law enforcement, Corporal Michael Paredes and Officer Joseph Santana of the El Monte Police Department were killed during a shootout with a suspect who happened to be a gang member on probation for weapons charges in California and was on the street after receiving a lenient sentence under a plea deal. Justin William Flores is accused of killing 2 El Monte police officers Tuesday night of this week. He had a previous strike conviction, received 2 years probation for a charge of being a felon in possession of a firearm. The sentence is in accordance with the policies of Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascon. We talked about him in the first hour of the Wells Report today. He was recently taken to task by a state appeals court over his refusal to prosecute the 3 strike cases. That's a case where if you commit 3 felonies, you end up in prison for life. That allowed Flores to plead no contest. He received a light sentence despite having a strike on his criminal record. It isn't working. Dismantling the legal system, dismantling the justice system, refusing to prosecute open crime is making this a worse country. The people that are doing it are people that have been chosen by we, the people. Can there be any stronger case for doing something different? I just don't think so. I just don't think so. We, the people of the United States, at the end of the day, are responsible for all of this. Can we do something different, please? You're listening to The Wells Report. Another hour coming up next. Okay. See you guys in just a minute. And I'm back. And we're back. And we're back. All right. About 30 seconds. Do. T.J. Rooney. I lived in Denton for 20 years, graduated of UNT, worked at UNT for a number of years. College town. Always thought that there was a good balance of lefty liberal to real Americans. I even saw it at UNT. That's nice. Thanks for the update. Okay. Here we go. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. We bring you news, analysis, commentary, and debate. You can debate a couple of different ways. Call 817-379-2172. Also, you can take part in the chat, which is going on right this very moment as we speak. We've been talking a little bit about leftist influence on our society and whether or not it's actually progressive. Seems that what we're seeing is we're seeing a progression into essentially a fragmenting of, a division of, and a great deal of sickness of our society. It doesn't seem to be working at all. In fact, it seems to be working at cross purposes with the Constitution of the United States. The Constitution of the United States has been turned into a political plaything by politicians. We keep sending them back to Washington. They keep playing with it. We keep decrying it. We keep sitting there and saying, gosh, this is terrible. Well, by golly, it sure is terrible. But we don't seem to be willing to do the hard things necessary to fix it. Like, for example, ignoring an in-the-bag for the left media, which is as plain as day. We seem to turn away from that as if it's irrelevant. It's not irrelevant. They're screwing us up. They're screwing us up, and what we're doing is we're allowing it. And as this degenerates over time, as more and more, shall we say, agents of the left exert the rules that are out there because we want to be fair. And what we're doing is we're seeing the opportunity for people with different ideas to essentially be the tail wagging the dog. We seem to be watching it. And we don't seem to be doing anything about it. It's simple. We get rid of all the people that have been paid off. And please forgive me if there are people up there, and I know there are. I know several people in Washington, D.C. that are nothing more than amazing, wonderful human beings out to serve this nation. But they are being submerged by exploiters of the fairness the Constitution enshrined in the best possible political documents ever given to a society. We have the power to change this anytime we choose. Well, not necessarily any time, but certainly every 2 years or so. We get an opportunity to be able to change this as we see fit. But do we? Apparently not. And we had better change our ways before the ways change us. George Soros is a guy who has taken his billions of dollars and become a one-man empowerment of the kind of societal degeneration that is played out. And it's not on leftist media outlets or rightist media outlets. It's on all media outlets. You can see this as plain as day. And it becomes more and more absurd as time goes by. A guy standing in front of a burning building talking about a peaceful protest. Excuse me? That was on CNN. And we can find more examples. And when we do, we share them. We can say, oh, this evil George Soros. We can say, oh, this evil squad, or we can say all of these things and so on, but we don't do anything about it. George Soros, for his part, is realizing the power of the leftist biased media and is doing his best to make it a leftist progressive biased media. And you got to hand it to him. He knows exactly what he needs to do to have the most impact on society that his own, I don't know, I can't really describe it as anything except willingness to bring down the greatest country that God ever gave man. There's a place in Miami. It's a radio station. It's called Radio Mambi. It's a popular Spanish language talk radio station. They spend their airtime raging against Cuba's communist leaders and the Democrats they believe are too soft on them before the producer cuts to another health insurance commercial set to a merry salsa tune. That's kind of an unkind assessment. This is by the Washington Post, in case you're wondering. The Washington Post has come up with this article. It's called A Political Brawl Over a Miami Giant of Spanish Talk Radio. In recent days, these callers, as well as the on-air hosts, have focused their ire on South Florida's radio giant's soon-to-be new owners, the Latino Media Network, a startup founded by two Latinas who built their careers working for Democrats. This month, the group reached a $60 million deal with Mexican-American company Televisa Univision to purchase 18 radio stations, including Radio Mambi. I feel like I've lost a loved one caller said on a recent afternoon before turning angry. This is a ploy by the left. The surprise sale of Radio Mambi, founded in the 1980s by Cuban exile businessmen and a fixture on Miami airwaves, has become a flashpoint in a larger debate about free speech and Spanish language misinformation on the radio. A medium that industry analysts say has far more resonance with Latinos than any other demographic group in the country. It's also a window into the pitched battle for crucial electorate votes at a time when the Republican Party has made rapid inroads with Latino voters, including right here in Texas. We talked about that in the first hour of the Wells Report. Find the podcast. I hope you enjoy it. Democrats blame Spanish language AM stations like Radio Mambi for spreading falsehoods that cost them votes in 2020, such as repeating Trump campaign claims that President Biden would turn the United States into a socialist state. I mean, search your memory. Do you honestly believe that that's not what's happening? Where a federal government solution to every problem seems to be exactly what Joe Biden is trying to inflict on the nation? That's what I see. What about you? Latino Media's two founders, former Obama White House staffer Stephanie Valencia and former Hillary Clinton campaign aide Jess Morales Roqueto, have not yet signaled any content changes and promise they won't diminish Radio Mambi's commitment to Cuban freedom and its flagship cause. We believe wholeheartedly in that mission, and we will remain true to that spirit of liberty that has guided them over the decades. But they won't do an interview. They also assert their support of a free press which values verifiable facts and balance, and promised all points of view will be welcomed and encouraged to debate in the free marketplace of ideas so that listeners can make informed decisions for themselves and their families. Really? Isn't that what CNN tries to do every day? Is there any doubt that CNN is warped so beyond journalism that it's almost unrecognizable as a journalistic source? The station on-air personalities are lashing out, many of the state's most powerful conservative politicians. Some, although not all, of Latino Media Network's investors and advisors have backed Democrat causes, such as actress Eva Longoria Baston, An investment firm with ties to liberal billionaire George Soros has become a perennial focus of right-wing conspiracy theories. Are they conspiracy theories? With George Soros electing progressive, read anti-society district attorneys, can we go ahead and move beyond saying that that's not a conspiracy and certainly not a theory? It's plain reality. America, a self-correcting mechanism, is currently correcting that. Critics of the new ownership are triggered by Valencia's previous work in researching the Latino electorate and concerns she has raised about the spread of QAnon-type conspiracy theories, false election fraud claims, and COVID misinformation in digital Spanish language media. They're framing their concerns about misinformation as an attempt at censorship. The people that are against the new owner say that she's using misinformation as a lever to practice censorship, which is exactly what's been going on, so much so that it was universally rejected when the Biden administration tried it. They have their liberal progressive agenda, said Ninoska Perez Castellon, one of Radio Mambi's most popular hosts. She told her listeners last week, "You can be sure that my principles and dignities don't have a price and are not for sale." I know exactly how she feels. Campaigning for re-election, Republican Governor Ron DeSantis has run ads on Radio Mambi warning about Soros and his minions coming with their ideological agenda. In a letter to the Federal Communications Commission's chairwoman, the state's GOP senators Marco Rubio and Rick Scott joined Representative Mario Diaz-Balart of Florida, he's a Republican, and others in opposing the sale, calling it a far from benign move by elite progressives desperate to claw back support for Hispanic voters, or from Hispanic voters. Perez Castellon took calls into her popular show. One was a listener who mused conspiratorially about a supposed New World Order plot to oust President Donald Trump from the White House so socialists can redistribute global wealth. Can someone explain to me that that's not happening? Especially when it comes to global climate change and its exploits and exploitation of people and money and power. I mean, we don't have to go very far to see how that works. Look at the bank account of Al Gore. He's doing just fine. It's something that has been planned for a long time. It's written in the Bible. Perez Castellon, an elegant 70-something with a sideline and whimsical watercolors inspired by her native Havana, pushed back gently. There are a lot of ways to interpret the Bible, she offered. That's exactly what I was thinking. But she encouraged her listeners to stand up for their beliefs. We need to be attentive, vigilant, and vibrant. In 1965, Radio Mambi was launched among Miami's first Spanish-language radio stations, became the political voice of a highly engaged electorate. Soon enough, presidential candidates were dropping by. It's the soundtrack of Cuban exile politics, said Albert Laguna, professor at Yale University who focuses on race, ethnicity, and migration. With a clear anti-Castro position, Radio Mambi's hosts never attempted to be neutral or impartial, calling the station a bully pulpit where more moderate voices are shot down. Moderate or leftist progressive? See, that's that fairness I'm talking about. It's that fairness I'm talking about. This misinformation thing, this well-worn route of attacks on the First Amendment, it doesn't make any difference who's attacking. A debate, a spirited debate, okay, even a rude debate, is better than censorship. Don't you think? George Soros using the intrinsic fairness of America to try to denigrate, even destroy America. Do we need to continue that, or do we need to stop it? You're listening to The Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. You are listening to the Wells Report and watching it too. Thank you so much for doing both. Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn. Lots of people watching. Thanks so much for doing so. Thanks for giving me the gift of your ears and eyes. We were talking a little bit about leftist influence on society, whether it's helping us or not. I don't think it is. Lots of stories where leftist policies have run societies off the road. The legalization of marijuana has led to an unbelievable amount of people having car accidents under the influence of marijuana. Should marijuana be legal? Well, that's a matter of opinion. The current circumstances, I'm a bit concerned about all that insofar as we don't know enough about marijuana and its effects on the human body to be able to actually tell when someone's under the influence. It's easy to tell them when they're really under the influence, but that stuff stays in your body for a long time. A long time. Are your reactions where they need to be? We don't know. But is leftist society and leftist politics helping our nation? Certainly not helping our economy. Between putting $1.9 trillion into the economy then reacting by soaking up as much of that money as they possibly could. Now the Fed is playing around with interest rates to be able to get some of that money back into the government. And we find ourselves with prices going everywhere, haywire, in fact. Gasoline, $5 a gallon. People not driving as much. Fuel, the actual fuel of the American economy, in short supply, way too expensive, prices going up and will continue to. With the Fed's action, the predictable occurred. The Dow Jones Industrial Average today tumbled below the 30,000 level for the first time since January of 2021. I remember when it crossed 30,000 the other direction, President Biden said, "My goodness gracious, things are good again." What's he going to say this time? Investors now worry the Federal Reserve's aggressive approach toward curbing inflation would bring the economy into a recession. Well, I suppose you could blame it on the Fed if you really, really wanted to, but what's actually doing it is the price of fuel and energy. And that is a political calculation. After the Fed announced the largest rate hike in 1994, the actual stock markets rallied. But then reality set in. The Dow dropped 2.42% or 741.46 points to 29,927. The S&P slipped 3.25 to 3666.77. That, by the way, is bear territory for the S&P. NASDAQ Composite slid 4.08% to 10,646.10, touched its lowest level since September of 2020. Major averages suffered steep losses this week. The S&P is down 6%. NASDAQ has fallen 6.1%. The blue chip Dow is off almost 5 points, on pace for its 11th losing week of the last 12. So how's that new green economy working for you? Kind of wondering about that myself. How's it working? You know what? I don't think it is. Matter of fact, I think it's working against us. We'll keep our eyes on it. Maybe things will rebound. We'll see. But remember, all this, a return to American prosperity, a safer society, all of this can begin its return in a voting booth near you in the 2022 elections. That's the way I see it. How do you see it? Call us. 817-379-2172. You are listening to the Wells Report. I am John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. I have long decried the leftist bias of the American mainstream media. This has been led by CNN, which has been called the cable news network, the Clinton news network, the communist news network. There have been all kinds of ways to describe CNN, especially under the leadership of former CNN boss Jeff Zucker. Jeff Zucker decided to lead the network away from a straight-ahead news organization, or something resembling a straight-ahead news organization. There was always a leftist bias on CNN, but it became a lurid caricature of itself under Jeff Zucker. There is a new CNN boss. His name is Chris Licht, Licht. What he's trying to do is he's trying to turn CNN back into a news organization. And he is evaluating the entire organization. This, by the way, is from Fox News, so take this with a grain of salt. Recently appointed CNN chairman and CEO Chris Licht is assessing who should stick around and who should be shown the door, as he is determined to tamp down the spectacle and restore the network's reputation. CNN insider, a CNN insider not named, an anonymous source, sarcastically my favorite, quote, Chris is in the midst of an entire org evaluation, which includes a review of talent and executives, not just two anchors. He's determined to tamp down spectacle and has discouraged the presentation of content in an alarmist fashion. The two anchors that they're talking about came from an Axios report that suggested that Brian Stelter and Jim Acosta were seen as the face of the network's liberal shift. It is not the case. They are simply participants. Jim Acosta essentially cashed in his journalistic credentials while he was a White House reporter for CNN during the Trump years and led the all but revolt in the White House press office during Trump press secretary news conferences. Brian Stelter is a political hack. He is nuts, in my view. Not because of his politics, but because he's genuinely nuts. Former boss Jeff Zucker forced out of his position earlier this year, ahead of a long-planned merger that put CNN under control of Warner Brothers. Discovery was largely responsible for the network's shift from a just the facts news operation to a channel largely focused on liberal opinion programming and criticism of conservative ideology. Licht, named as Zucker's successor, hopes to put an emphasis back on news. I certainly hope so. This insider, who is familiar with Licht's thinking, said the new boss is in the midst of a listening tour, hasn't reached a conclusion on any programming decisions, aside from the previously announced decision to reimagine CNN's morning show New Day later this year. Licht has already toned down the network's use of breaking news, the on-screen graphic that you saw every 2.5, 3 minutes. Fox News Digital has also learned that Licht recently informed staffers he was not thrilled with CNN anchors and pundits who regularly referred to former President Donald Trump's 2020 election claims as, quote, the big lie, unquote. It's used constantly by Stelter, Anderson Cooper, Jake Tapper, Jim Acosta. Licht believes it sounds more like a hashtag or a bumper sticker, not a precise cable news statement for their audiences. However, he did not issue a mandate or formal guidance to stop using the term. Licht's brief tenure has already seen a handful of Zucker area executives depart, including Andrew Morse, who oversaw the launch of CNN's failed streaming service, CNN Plus. Licht pulled the plug on CNN Plus in April, weeks after the costly streaming service was launched. Earlier this week, CNN averaged 393,000 total viewers for its smallest weekday audience since November 2nd of 2015. That excluded Thanksgiving Day, by the way. The network also had its least viewed non-Thanksgiving weekday during the hours of 9 to 5, where CNN's daytime lineup managed 489,000 average viewers. In my tenure as the host of the Wells Report, I've had more listeners than that on one show, on one radio station. Wow. The bleak performance on Tuesday came 48 hours after Stelter's reliable sources had its lowest rated episode since September of 2019 on Sunday. 580,000 viewers. All those numbers are courtesy of Nielsen. Variety is reporting that Rebecca Cutler, the key CNN talent executive, will depart. A longtime CNN talent and development executive had a hand in the success of anchors and contributors, including Abby Phillips, Van Jones, leaving the news outlet, a move that is said to be raising eyebrows among some of the Warner Brothers Discovery outlet's team of journalists. Cutler had most recently been senior vice president, head of programming for CNN Plus, the much-promoted streaming video hub, was scuttled by CNN's new corporate parent quickly after the merger of Discovery and Warner Media. Influence at CNN spans well beyond the new streaming efforts. She also oversaw analysts, contributors, commentators, a job she has held since 2015, a key lieutenant for former CNN chief Jeff Zucker, as well as Amy Antelis, who oversaw talent at the news venue. Her departure was announced at a morning editorial meeting on today, as a matter of fact, according to three people familiar with the matter. CNN has declined to comment so far. During her time, she worked as an executive producer for Don Lemon and John King. Among others, she also hired Philip and Andrew McCabe. She played a role in bringing Chris Wallace, Audie Cornish, and Casey Hunt to CNN for the launch of CNN Plus. Her exit is the latest in a short line of senior CNN staffers who have left in recent weeks. We already talked about Andrew Morse, who oversaw the launch of CNN Plus. Meredith Artley, editor-in-chief of CNN Digital, who'd been with the company for more than a decade. Alex McCallum, who had been named interim chief of CNN Digital Operations. Robin Peterson, CNN Digital's chief technology officer. New CNN CEO Chris Licht, running operations. Warner Brothers Discovery is trying to scale back some of the excesses developed at CNN during the leadership of Jeff Zucker. Zucker encouraged anchors and correspondents to display their passions about particular topics and issues. Licht, at least so far, has advised moderation, telling CNN producers to scale back the use of breaking news on-screen graphics that have become a cable news mainstay, focusing more intently on a block of Sunday programming focused on enterprise reporting. Now, you have seen some of that moderation already in effect. Don Lemon was less than bootlicking when it came to asking about Joe Biden's mental state. There was an article today where he stuck to his guns and said, you know what? I'm going to ask about these things. It's my job. Well, okay. But one of the things that you learn in this business relatively quickly is that you have to make sense. And if you don't, you find yourself out of the game. You can't be biased. You have to be straight ahead. You have to explain to people what you're talking about. The Wells Report is about the Constitution, its implementation, its political manipulation. It's about a country brilliantly chartered by those documents, straying far and away from them. That's what all that's about. That's what this show's about. I try as hard as I possibly can not to seem biased against leftist progressive causes, but I can't see anything good coming from them. Now, once again, debate is a mainstay of this broadcast. People disagree with me all the time. That's okay. I just want to know what you're basing it on. I have computers all around me. The idea of those computers is simple, so that I can stop the broadcast and actually research something on the spot. That was a lot easier before Alphabet, the parent company of Google, decided to start editing the internet for political purposes. But you can still find it. They can't get everything. They try, but they can't. And I think that the obvious censorship of big tech has been exposed in stinging and precise relief. And I'm reasonably sure that most of that, if not has ended or will shortly end, because it's bad for business. It's bad for CNN. CNN has become a joke. It has become a learning opportunity for everyone in journalism schools from one end of the country to the other. There's some very talented people there. Jake Tapper used to be a straight-ahead journalist, asking tough questions of both sides consistently, and for some reason turned himself into a leftist pundit. And that's sad for the world of journalism because he's good. Chris Wallace, who made the move to CNN from Fox News, saying that he believed that Fox News was no longer a news organization, might find himself a very comfortable place at CNN if indeed they pursue news. Don't get me wrong. I think Chris Wallace was bending left to the point where it was a distraction and to a point where it was at cross purposes with the news. But he knows better. Jake Tapper knows better. Anderson Cooper, I'm less sure of. I'm less sure of those guys. Brian Stelter's a joke. Don Lemon might be chameleon enough to be able to survive all this. I don't know. But here's the point of this. It's not just to talk media. The point of this is to say that vibrant, accurate, skeptical, fair, balanced journalism is essential to the United States of America. That's why we have it. That's why we have a free press. For that exact reason. It's essential. Without a free press, and I'm not talking about a biased one. I'm not talking about a press that's free to exploit its bias for political effect. Without a free press, there is no freedom. The aspirational words of the Washington Post, democracy dies in the dark. It also rots in the twisted light of biased politics. You see, when I got into broadcasting, we operated in the public interest as a public trustee. Those are the words from the 1934 Communications Act. We do have a position of public trust. It is essential to put your ego in your pocket, provide the information, moderate a reasonable discussion of the most important issues of the day in search of two things: truth and solutions. We don't look for opportunity and exploitation. That's what CNN became. As I said earlier in the show, America is a self-correcting mechanism. This is part of that correction. The ratings, when a popular radio talk show, such as the Wells Report, can have higher number of people watching it than television, especially on a network. Ooh, well, that's awful. And so eventually, at some point, there has to be a correction. And fortunately, that correction seems to have seems to have visited itself on CNN. Let's hope. Let us hope. You are listening and watching the Wells Report. I don't have a huge staff of people. As a matter of fact, you're looking at my huge staff of people. But I persevere. And I only persevere because you are there. And I sincerely appreciate the fact that I can say that. Coming up in just a little bit, we'll have one look at something that I saw last night that I think you should see tonight. If you haven't seen it already, I'll discuss that in a moment. You're watching the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. You are listening to the Wells Report. Thanks for doing so. I'm John David Wells. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. So last night, I did something that I had been looking forward to for a while. I went out and saw Top Gun Maverick. Top Gun Maverick. Got to be honest with you, it was a really good movie. It was very, very good. I looked at it from several different viewpoints. I looked at it from my normal viewpoint, which is how is the film crafted? How is the story told? And both of those, I was not in that movie. Do not believe everything you read on the chat, okay? I was not in that movie. Okay. Although the older I get, the more I look like Ed Harris. I'm really concerned about that too. Anyway, I looked at it from a film standpoint. It was a beautifully told story. It was very, very good. It was well crafted. There were some clunky moments. There were some things that went, huh? No, I wasn't baggage handler number 2. I wasn't. I was not. I was not in the movie. Yeah, like I'd be in a movie. It's ridiculous. Let's move on. I also watched it from a standpoint of technical merit and the people flying those jets, because Tom Cruise assured us that the flying we saw in that film was the flying that was being done while that film was being shot. And that was amazing. It was just plain amazing aviation. I mean, it was incredible. I looked at it from a standpoint of how well it was acted. It was acted beautifully. It really was. I was very impressed. There's a humanity coming out in Tom Cruise that he's getting better at portraying. Like I said, there were some clunky moments. Get to those in a minute. The flying was amazing. It was beautiful. The acting, by the way, was in some ways not acting. There is a character in the film that experiences what is known as G-lock. And in that particular point, they've portrayed G-lock and actually how you feel as the blood drains out of your head and what you see and what you feel. Now, there was a moment where one of the actors was not acting. He was actually put under a bunch of G's from the pilot that was actually flying the aircraft, and he blacked out. It's not a pretty picture. It is not a pretty picture, but it indeed happens. All right? As far as the story itself, I was impressed with the story that they came up with. There were some things that were kind of strange. There was an aircraft at the beginning of the film that looked like a cross between a UFO and the SR-71. There was something that looked really right about that aircraft. It was supposedly capable of hypersonic flight. And they did do some CG in it. That's computer-generated graphics. And what happened is that they flew one of those jets at about an altitude of, 50 feet, over Ed Harris, standing beside a guard shack, supposedly at Edwards Air Force Base. Actually, probably was Edwards Air Force Base. When the jet went over, it actually went over Ed Harris, not a stuntman. The compression coming from the wings blew the roof off the guard shack. And that wasn't planned. I was just happy it headed away from Ed Harris and anybody on the crew, because that could have been painful. The story was plausible. It was brilliantly acted. The flying, I've already talked about. But what struck me about this was the humanity of it. There was actual human characters. There were actually human characters that took part in a very human story. It was really quite good. Closed a lot of the loops and did pretty well. A couple of absurdities. The surface-to-air missile sequence, fakey. Yeah, that was fakey. The flying that was done around them, not fakey. Very, very cool. But the actual missile batteries themselves, they wanted them to look like Soviet 300s. They kind of missed. Also, the love interest for Maverick, never saw the woman before, at least in the storyline. Who was Penny? I don't know. But apparently, she played the part of a penny for Maverick's thoughts. Go see the film. It was much better. It was a much better film than the original. And I never, ever saw flying that good. Ever. I'm sure it happens every day. But let me tell you, it's pretty impressive. Top Gun Maverick. 2 thumbs up. Thanks for watching this edition of the Wells Report. Thanks for listening to it, too. I hope you have a wonderful evening. I'll see you for the Friday edition tomorrow, because tomorrow will be Friday. See you later. Wow. Hello, you have contacted John David Productions, LLC, Fort Worth, Texas. Unfortunately, no one's here to take your phone call, so at the sound of the tone, please leave your name, your number at the time you called, any brief message you'd like me to have, and I'll get back in touch just as soon as I can. Thanks for calling. Who could that possibly be? Hello? 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 Who is it? Ms. Joan, I just got 2 phone calls from your august organization. And I was wondering, I don't know who called. Who? Who am I? John Wells. Yes, I am. Yes, I do. She's my wife. Those are gifts that I ordered for Susan. Good for you. Darn. Okay, so you can pick them. Okay, by all means, pick them. I just wanted the amber to match the centerpiece of the ensemble is the necklace. So if you can, yeah, basically, what I want you to do is if you can find earrings that are not. No, I want you to no, just pick them and send them. Okay, and if there's a difference in price, uh call me on the phone and or text me or something, and I'll get you the money. Oh, well. Oh, okay. Well, you can certainly take it if you choose. And what? Well, I mean, she's a classy gal. So, pick the ones that you would wear. I just hope I would just like the amber to match. I tried to do that with the bracelet. I tried to do that with the bracelet. Yeah. Oh, how nice of you to call. Yeah. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Oh, by the way, that part wasn't supposed to be on the stream. So there you go. Now you know how I speak with people. God bless you and take care.